Good Lord, YouTube. It's been a little while. How y'all doing out there? It's your boy Mike here, finding a random screw on my workbench here. And it looks like a small one. That's just the way we do it here. Random stuff. Yeah, I'm Mike. This is my channel, Solid State Alchemy. And I'm in my basement. And I like to talk about computers. I build computers, play on computers, I test computers, I overclock computers. Yeah, all those things. So today, okay, you guys have had a lot of interest in a video I did a few months ago on a Montech case. Really beautiful case. Looks really nice once you get it all assembled, but I've noticed, you know, there were a lot of comments on people who found that video that were like, you know, confused about what this was or how to plug in, specifically all concerning the RGBs. I'm not always the best explainer, and I didn't explain that very well in that video. I've actually ordered another Montech case. That one's sold. I built a computer in that and sold it probably the next week or two. So I didn't get a chance to like go back and do another like reconfigure or re-examination of what the Montech case looks like. So I'll try and do that again. Although it looks like the Phantom, the case that I originally reviewed, is no longer available from Amazon. So I think I got the right case. They're not very good about you know, keeping their part numbers up to date. But that's neither here nor there. I saw you guys liked case reviews, so I'm here with another case review. And this one, we're going as cheap as we can get. This case regularly retails for under $30. Between $30 and $40 is very average to find it, but you can find it on sale for like $29.99. I think I got this one for $27.99. And this is the Montech Flyer. I'm not sure where it's flying to or how quickly it's flying. It doesn't have very many wings, but it is a box for your stuff. And that really is where I could end the review. This thing is just a box for your computer. That's really the purpose it serves. It's got some ventilation. It's not really adequate out of the box. When you unpackage this thing, if you try to put a PC that needs a lot of ventilation or like uses a lot of wattage, you are going to overheat it more than likely if you don't take steps to either modify or remedy, brute force it, as they say, with fans or whatnot. I'm going to go over it piece by piece here and talk about what I did, what I found, and why I did the things I did. I got my tasty libation here as usual. So this is a cheap case, and I built a very cheap PC in it. It does not use a lot of power. It has a 1650 Super GPU and an i3-9100F on a B360 motherboard. It's very, very low wattage draw. I think altogether, like at full chat, like if you put this thing on the OCCT PSU torture test where it pulls full wattage from everything, I think the whole system might draw 200 watts max. But even so, it's got a 600 watt EVGA bronze 80 plus power supply in there. Yeah, so I put it together. It does fine. This is a great esports build, but I would not recommend, unless you're going to take my advice coming up in the rest of this video, I would not recommend you put components that are significantly more power hungry than this pairing right here. Definitely would not recommend you put like a 9700K in here and overclock it with a I don't even know, like, well, don't put I mean, if you can buy one, who in the right mind would put a 30 series a 3000 series RTX card in here? But I wouldn't recommend that either. I really wouldn't recommend putting any graphics card that's going to pull more than 150 watts, 200 max in this case. And it really revolves around we're going to start at the front. It revolves around this. This is the front like fascia panel. There's no I/O integrated into this. This just pops right off. It's held on with some pegs. It has some LEDs integrated into it that shoot that wire just straight into the power supply. Let's look at the. So this is the part of last video that I didn't do very well, which was reference the connections for the LEDs. So you've got a clicker or a wire that goes from this LED strip up to a button on the top I/O, and that simply cycles it through its different modes and colors. And then there's another wire that goes down and connects to SATA power. That's it. There's no option for motherboard control of this front LED strip, not as configured. Yeah, there was no option to take this off the clicker and have it connect to like a 4 or 3 pin RGB controller. Not in the case that I received here. So that's pretty straightforward, and that's the only bling on this case. It doesn't come with a RGB fans or an RGB hub or anything like that, right? It's just straight up one little RGB strip or LED strip that has some color change functionality. What else? The build quality of this is honestly better than I would expect for the price point. It is a fairly rigid chassis. There's not a lot of flex. You know, most of the pieces are fairly sturdy. They don't feel like super wafer thin. It's wider than a lot of these cheaper cases are, and that's good for a couple of reasons, and we'll get to that in a second. But it is fairly deep. Like once you're in here in the actual bay of it, it does give you some depth, and that's good because that could let you mount a fairly good sized tower cooler here. They don't specify in the literature what the max height of this is, but it looks like, you know, you could get, let's see, I've got a Noctua right here. So this is a Noctua MDH. It's got thermal paste all over it. Let's try not to get that. So that looks like that is a go. I would say that that's going to barely squeeze in a full-size Noctua tower cooler. Yeah, I think you can make it work. So however tall this thing is, that's about the size you're going to get. Now the problems for this case start at the front also though. As you'll see, it's conspicuously lacking something, and that is ventilation. It has, let's see if I can get it flipped around here for you guys, just this one, well you can see it from the front. There's one, this is awesome. There's one strip of perforated metal mesh, and it's heavy duty. I mean for metal mesh, it's thick, it's bendable, it bends back and forth in place. It's got tabs across the back in here. It looks like I didn't bend very many of these back. I could probably. So let me show you what I did to make this thing just a little bit more usable. I'll make sure I've got all these bent back up. So there's just a few tabs along the back here that you bend up, and then this just, yeah, this pops out. This mesh cover plate pops out. So that's what you've got to work with, right? As far as like, I guess you could kind of consider this filtration a little bit. It's, you know, it's not fine mesh, I would say, but it does. I would almost say that it's got more material than holes, almost. So it's definitely an obstruction. I would consider this an obstruction. now you can see what I've done in the back here. So behind this metal mesh here was this honeycomb structure, all the way repeated all the way up and down this inlet. I took a Dremel and Dremeled all of that out of there, just to get rid of some of the material and allow more air to flow through. And what I also did, so when this case shipped to me, this entire bottom plane here was plastic. It was plastic all the way across, from here, right here, this little point here, all the way to here. This was a solid chunk of plastic. And I took a Dremel cut-off wheel and I cut all the way across and gave it about, that's about a 1/2 inch gap all the way across the front of the fascia. The other thing I did, so this shipped with a, oh no, it did. This shipped with 2, so that's all I did. That is all I did. I was going to say that I swapped the fans, but I did not. I decided I was not going to. So these are the fans that it shipped with, 2 120mm fans, front and back. This one's mounted in the middle. You have the option, I think there's enough room to mount 2 more 120mm fans. I think you could actually, does it have, I think it has the side, yeah, it has the option. That was going to be my upgrade path, was I had some 140mm fans that I was going to toss in here if I didn't get any results from the dremeling. But the dremeling actually helped considerably, even though these are fairly low wattage parts. I dropped about 5 degrees Celsius off of both the GPU and the CPU temperature while running the OCCT like power virus setting, the one that ramps up your CPU and your GPU simultaneously. I think they used to call that the power supply test in previous versions of OCCT, but that is what I use to measure case thermals when I'm trying to figure out, is this case capable of worst case scenario, right? So that was a fairly good result. Leaving this off entirely dropped it another 2 degrees Celsius. So just this piece of metal mesh right here is worth 2 degrees Celsius on your GPU and CPU temperatures. And in the times of, you know, thermal velocity boost, etc., 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 those technologies are going to trickle farther and farther down the product stack. Eventually, you know, your Ryzen 3 6300 is going to have, you know, some kind of like boosting algorithm that allows it to boost 1 or 2 cores based on how many degrees Celsius you can get it below whatever threshold is set by the engineers. But that was and still is, if you're going to purchase this case, the main drawback is the front panel airflow is miserable. There is more material to be removed. I could have gone ham. If I was going to put 2 more fans in here, I would definitely go all the way up to the top as far as I could get. You'll see there's some solid parts in here, and that's where there's like standoffs in the back for like mounting and just location, physical locating of the panel. But I would have gone ham and taken out, you know, even more of these, especially if I had a higher power system in here. That would definitely be on my list, would be 2 more fans in the front, or maybe 2 140mm fans in the front, and then dremeling out the rest of this honeycomb on this panel. Because once you put that over there, you really can't see it. It's really not very noticeable at all. Okay, so that was like the first thing I found where I was like, man, this is a cheap case, and this is what you get with a cheap case. But there are also, you know, some definite upsides to this case, surprisingly so. If you wanted to do a custom loop in this case, I think it is actually pretty doable. There is room for a 240mm radiator in the front, plenty of depth for fans. Now, one thing you've got to look at though is where you're mounting your SSDs. you're not going to be able to get to the back side. Now this says SSD here, but I believe there's enough room to put them, to flip mount them, to mount them on the back side of the motherboard tray here, and have the screws poke through this way, and then route your SATA cables up into the main compartment here. It has a basement, which is nice. That's good for, you know, hiding your messy cable management like I do. But one thing that's kind of weird about the basement is that there are no there's no fan, shroud, anything. There's no options for additional airflow through the basement, which is kind of neither here nor there. I very, very rarely take advantage of the basement fan shrouds, but I know some people do like that for aesthetics. If they're going to do RGB fans all the way around, it looks nice to have like that horseshoe effect, and you got one here, so you're almost 360-degree effect of RGB there. Not really an option here. I mean, you could put the fans there, they're just not going to blow any air anywhere. What else? Yeah, so, and also, if you're going to put a radiator here, it's probably going to be in the push configuration only. You could mount a push-pull there, I guess, but I think it would make more sense to put the fans on the outside. That's what I did. Now, one thing I could have done, though, since what I've got going on here, is I could have flipped the mounting of this fan. That is one thing that I never tried, was to take this fan on the outside and put it to the inside and turn this into like a more of an air chamber for this fan. That might have actually netted a couple of degrees. That, you'd be surprised. You know, fluid dynamics is a tricky thing. So if you're just going to add one more 140 millimeter fan, or two 140s, or an additional 120 millimeter fan, I would definitely recommend taking it off of the front of the case like it's mounted here and mounting it on the inside. That allows this front fascia to become kind of like an air chamber, an air funneling chamber, to get better, what do you call that? Laminar flow almost of air through both that port and through the bottom there. I should test that. And then for top mounting, so I like how this is done. Let me just snap this back in place here so I can kind of show you, so I can move this around a little bit easier. This is just 2 clicks there, top and bottom. So top radiator mounting is definitely doable. You could definitely get a 240 millimeter rad and fans up here because it's offset from the motherboard. I really like that. I think that in a sub $50 case, that's actually some really nice design design awareness to put that into the case, because as we saw in the Mustex, the way they had the top, a case that cost almost 3 times as much as this case, the way they had their top grates aligned and the holes aligned, it put the radiator right on top of your VRMs and everything for your motherboard, so there's just no chance of getting a rad and fans in the top. But you could definitely get a rad and fans in the top here, or you could just use this for additional fan and, you know, brute strength, some cooling into there. That would definitely help. If you mounted an additional fan in the front and 2 additional fans on the top, the cooling on this case would be absolutely, you know, above board. It's going to handle almost any scenario of air-cooled components you're going to throw into it. And that's really not bad. Case fans are not always that expensive. You know, you don't have to go for Leanne Lee, whatever their, you know, linkage Lego block making fans are. You know, you can just get some Rosewill 120 millimeter case fans. They move air. I got a box of them over there. It cost me $12 for 4 of them. So yeah, there are definitely some positives to this case. Number 1, it's very cheap. Number 2, it has pretty good options for additional fan and radiator placement. Number 3, it's cheap. The build quality is actually not terrible. Although I will say, you know, it doesn't come with a, you don't get a nice glass side panel. You get this. And this is not the greatest, right? I mean, this is just some plastic. It's clear plastic, plexiglass, whatever. Yeah. It's cheap. But it does, you know, I will say in defense of its cheapness, that a lot of cases in this price point come with a side panel that's smoked so dark you can't even really see. If you wanted to put RGB to be proud of whatever you put inside your ultra cheap case, the side panels are so dark you can no longer see the build inside. And even with the RGB, it's like, you know, looking at it through a pair of really dark sunglasses. Whereas this is very, very clear. I mean, that is definitely, you're going to see everything inside of the case. So it does have that going for it in defense of the cheapness. So you got a full basement, you've got good fan and rad options, 2 adequate 120 millimeter fans that come with it. Biggest drawbacks are the front fascia, while stylish, I guess, if you like that minimalist look, is extremely constrictive, but as I showed, it can be modified to get better, I wouldn't say good, but better airflow. And it's easy to build in. This case is definitely not hard to build in. I guess I was on drawbacks. So in addition to the not so great airflow of the front fascia, it also has, I don't know if it started, if I can say it continues the trend or started the trend, or just is one of the many cheap cases that does not offer or doesn't come with hard drive sleds. I understand that they are pinching pennies tightly here, right? I mean, this is like, how cheaply can we make this case to get it under a certain price point? Hard drive sleds have got to be like a penny a piece. Like, there's just no way that they are as expensive. They are so expensive that including a couple of them with this case would make it, you know, so that they didn't turn a profit. As you can see on the back here, it does have a mounting points for 2 3.5-inch hard drives. Comes with 0 hard drive trays, hard drive sleds. So you have to hard mount it in there, which is made fairly, I'm not going to take it off again, but with this front fascia off, you can get to the screws, the sides, to screw the screws into the side of here. But to get the hard drive in, the hard drive screws on this side, you need to do it before you put your power supply in. So that is super annoying. I don't understand why they can't include some hard drive trays. 2 hard drive trays, that's all you need. Really, just one. Just give me 1 hard drive tray to get me going, right? Maybe I'll hard mount the other one, I don't know. Maybe I only have 1. But yeah, just come on, guys. You're better than this. The I/O is pretty well, you know, it's top mount I/O. It's pretty well thought out. You know, you got a really large, easy to find power button there, a reset button. You got your standard power and hard drive activity LEDs. You've got the button I mentioned before for scrolling through the modes of your the front LED strip here. Headphone, microphone, and separate jacks. USB 2.0 and 1 singular USB 3.0. Let's talk about that 3.0 for a second. They definitely know who they're selling their cases to. They're selling it to people who maybe need an upgrade, just need to upgrade a case for an old or aging system, because the I/O, the front I/O cabling coming off of that has this little thing. I don't know if you can see that. It's got a little pigtail that comes off of the USB 3.0 header there, or wire from the front I/O, and I haven't seen that before. Maybe I'm just not experienced enough, but I've built in a lot of cheap cases, and I hadn't seen that particular configuration where there's like a pigtail coming out of the USB 3 wire for the front I/O that would plug into a USB 2.0 header, motherboard header. Now, I'm assuming that if you don't have a USB 2.0 header on your motherboard, which, you know, back in the olden days, I built a computer for my daughter with an FM2 Plus micro ATX board, and it did not have a USB 2.0 header. That you could take this little pigtail, and I'm assuming you could take this little pigtail and plug it into a regular USB 2.0 header on a motherboard and magically render the blue color of this USB 3.0 port up here meaningless because it is now a 2.0. But I guess it's better than not being able to hook it up at all. I guess that's where you get to, is that it's better than bad. It gives you an option, which I'm generally for options. So there's that. Alright guys, that's been the Montech Flyer. Hit me up with questions in the comments. I love to, you know, help you with your builds. So $30, super cheap, holds all your stuff, and it won't kill it. So yeah, I would rate this as a buy. Alright guys, I'm out.